I woke up on January 15th to complete silence, which should have been my first warning that something had gone catastrophically wrong. In rural Montana, specifically in the Pine Ridge development outside Billings, silence meant trouble. No water flowing through pipes, no familiar hum of the well pump cycling on and off. I threw back the covers and stumbled to the bathroom, turning the faucet. Nothing, not even a sputter. My name is Nathan Lawson, and I had lived in Pine Ridge for 3 years, ever since my divorce, when I needed a fresh start somewhere affordable with wide open spaces. The development consisted of 47 homes spread across 100 acres, each on roughly 2-acre lots. We shared a community well system that had been installed when the subdivision was built back in 2018. It had always worked perfectly, filtering clean Montana groundwater to every home through a network of underground pipes. I pulled on jeans and a thick flannel shirt, grabbed my phone, and headed outside into the bitter January cold. The temperature hovered around 15 degrees, with a wind chill that made it feel closer to zero. My breath came out in visible clouds as I trudged through the crusty snow toward the well house, a small concrete structure about 200 yards from my property line. The padlock on the well house door was new, shiny brass against the weathered gray door. I tried the handle anyway, knowing it would be locked but needing to confirm my growing suspicion. A laminated notice had been zip-tied to the chain-link fence surrounding the well house. I ripped it free and read the text, my blood pressure rising with each word. Notice of water shutoff. Due to multiple violations of Pine Ridge HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions, community water access has been suspended effective January 15, 2026, at 6:00 a.m. Water will be restored once all outstanding violations have been remedied and associated fines paid in full. Contact HOA President Denise Morrison for questions. This action is authorized under Article 7, Section 3 of the Pine Ridge CC and Articles. I read it 3 times, certain I must be misunderstanding something. They had shut off water to 47 homes in January. In Montana, because of HOA violations, my phone buzzed with incoming texts. The neighborhood group chat was exploding with messages. I scrolled through them as I walked back to my house, my fingers going numb despite my gloves. Anyone else have no water? What the hell is going on? Did someone hit the main line? There is a notice on the well house. HOA shut us off. This cannot be legal. I typed out a response as I climbed my front steps. Just read the notice. They shut off all our water over HOA violations. This is insane. My phone immediately rang. It was Victor Hayes, my neighbor 2 houses down. He was a retired teacher, mid-60s, who had moved here with his wife 4 years ago. "Nathan, please tell me you have water," Victor said, his voice strained. "Nothing. Bone dry, you, same. My wife needs her medication that requires water to take properly. We have maybe 2 bottles in the pantry. What violations are they even talking about?" "No idea. The notice does not specify, just says to contact Denise Morrison." Victor let out a string of creative profanities that reminded me he had taught high school for 30 years. That woman has been on a power trip since she became HOA president last year. But this is criminal. "Probably literally," I agreed. "You cannot just shut off water to an entire neighborhood. There have to be laws against this. I am calling her right now. Maybe she will answer her phone." I doubted it, but I let Victor go and immediately dialed Denise Morrison's number myself. It went straight to voicemail. Her message was clipped and professional, telling me to email her at the HOA address for non-emergency matters. I hung up without leaving a message and sent a text instead. "Denise, This is Nathan Lawson. You shut off water to 47 homes in the middle of winter. People have children and elderly family members here. This needs to be turned back on immediately. Call me. No response. Not even the 3 dots indicating she was typing. I spent the next hour fielding calls from neighbors and trying to figure out what we could do. Some people had a few gallons of stored water. Others had almost nothing. Margaret Chen, a single mother with 3 kids under 10, was nearly in tears when she called me. Her youngest was still in diapers and she had no way to properly clean him or wash bottles. I have about 6 gallons in my garage, I told her. Come get half of it. That should get you through today at least. Are you sure? What about you? I will manage. Come get it before the pipes start freezing. That was another nightmare waiting to happen. Without water flowing through the system and with inside temperatures dropping as people conserved heating fuel, we were looking at burst pipes throughout the neighborhood. The damage could be catastrophic. By noon, I had made contact with 32 of the 47 homeowners. Everyone was out of water. No one had received prior warning, and nobody could get Denise Morrison on the phone. I decided to drive to her house. She lived in Pine Ridge, too, in one of the larger homes near the front entrance. If she had shut off our water, she had shut off her own as well, unless she had somehow exempted herself. The roads were icy, and my truck fishtailed slightly as I navigated the development's winding streets. I passed houses where I could see neighbors outside, clearly distressed, some carrying containers of water from their cars. A few had started filling containers from melted snow, which was potentially dangerous if they did not boil it first. Denise Morrison's house was a sprawling ranch-style home with professional landscaping, or what counted as professional landscaping buried under 2 feet of snow. 3 cars sat in her driveway: a new Lexus SUV, a BMW sedan, and a contractor's truck. I parked on the street and walked up to the front door. I could hear raised voices inside before I even knocked. I pressed the doorbell and waited, the cold seeping through my coat. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened to reveal Denise Morrison in all her middle-aged glory. Perfectly highlighted blonde hair, expensive athleisure wear, and an expression that could curdle milk. "Nathan," she said, not quite making it sound like a greeting. "Denise, we need to talk about the water situation. I am in a meeting right now. You can email the HOA address with your concerns." She started to close the door. I put my hand up to stop it, not pushing, just preventing it from shutting. 47 families have no water, Denise. In January. This cannot wait for an email. Her jaw tightened. "Remove your hand from my door or I will call the police." "Call them. I would love to have law enforcement here about what you have done." We stared at each other for a long moment. Behind her, a man appeared. Tall, probably late 30s, wearing work clothes with a company logo I did not recognize. "Everything okay, Mrs. Morrison?" he asked. "Fine, Derek. Just a neighbor with questions about the water shutoff." She turned back to me. "The shutoff is completely legal and authorized by our CC and Articus. Multiple homeowners have been in violation of community standards for months. Written warnings were sent. Fines were assessed. No one complied. This is the enforcement mechanism." "What violations?" I demanded. "I never got a warning or a fine." "You most certainly did. 3 written notices about your shed being visible from the street, violating the aesthetic guidelines. And do not even get me started on the Thompson family's Christmas lights still being up in January, or the Martinez family's unauthorized fence installation." I felt like I had entered an alternate reality. "You shut off water to the entire neighborhood because my shed is visible and someone still has Christmas lights up." "Among other violations, yes. The CC and Articus are clear. If you wanted to live without rules, you should not have purchased property in a deed-restricted community. Denise, there are children here, elderly people. You cannot just shut off essential services over petty aesthetic complaints. I can and I did. The water will be restored when all violations are corrected and all fines are paid. Now, if you will excuse me. She stepped back and this time actually pushed the door closed. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood on her porch for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Through the window, I could see Denise talking animatedly with the contractor, gesturing with her hands. Then I noticed something. Water was running in her kitchen. I could see it clearly through the window, a stream flowing from the faucet into the sink. She had water. She had shut off the community well, but somehow maintained her own access. I pulled out my phone and took several pictures through the window, making sure to capture the running water. Then I walked back to my truck, my mind racing. This was not just a power trip. This was potentially illegal on multiple levels. Back home, I started making calls. First to a lawyer friend from my old job in Billings, Marcus Green. He did not practice HOA law specifically, but he would know who did. Marcus, I need a referral. HOA situation that has gone completely off the rails. How off the rails are we talking? I explained the situation. Marcus was silent for a long moment after I finished. Nathan, that is not just off the rails, that is potentially criminal. Shutting off water to residential properties in winter could fall under reckless endangerment at minimum. If anyone gets sick or injured as a result, it could be much worse. And if she exempted herself from the shutoff while cutting everyone else off, that is theft of services and possibly fraud. Can you recommend someone who can help us? Yeah, but honestly, you might want to start with the county health department and the sheriff's office. What she has done might be a public health emergency. Let me send you some contact information. My phone buzzed with an incoming call while I was still on with Marcus. I glanced at the screen. It was Victor Hayes. Marcus, I have to go. Send me those contacts. I switched over. Victor, Nathan, get over to the Hendersons' house right now. Ambulance is on the way. Gloria Henderson passed out. They think it is dehydration. I grabbed my coat and ran for my truck. The Hendersons lived on the far side of the development, about a mile from my place. Gloria Henderson was 82 years old with diabetes and kidney issues. Her husband Robert was 85 and barely mobile. I arrived just as the ambulance was pulling up. Neighbors had gathered outside, huddled against the cold. I found Robert Henderson sitting in his living room, looking 20 years older than the last time I had seen him. She just collapsed, he kept saying. We had been rationing our water trying to make it last. She would not drink much because she did not want to use up what we had. She just collapsed. The EMTs worked efficiently, getting Gloria onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, stopped to talk to Robert. Mr. Henderson, your wife is severely dehydrated. Her blood sugar is also dangerously high, likely related to the dehydration. We are taking her to Billings Clinic. Do you have someone who can drive you? I will take him, I said immediately. The EMT nodded. Good, sir, you look dehydrated too. When was the last time you had water? I am not sure. Yesterday sometime. The EMT looked at me. Make sure he drinks something on the way to the hospital. And you might want to contact whoever is responsible for your water situation, because this is a serious problem. After the ambulance left, I helped Robert gather some things for the hospital stay. Several neighbors had shown up with bottles of water, which I made Robert drink while we drove. He sipped slowly, his hands shaking. I do not understand, he said quietly. We paid our HOA dues. We followed the rules. Why would Denise do this to us? I did not have an answer for him. We drove in silence for a while before my phone rang through the truck's Bluetooth system. It was a number I did not recognize with a local area code. "This is Nathan." "Mr. Lawson, this is Deputy Chen with the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office. We received a complaint from a Denise Morrison that you threatened her at her home this morning. I would like to hear your side of the story. Of course she had called the cops on me." I took a deep breath and explained the entire situation, from waking up without water to my conversation with Denise, to the fact that I was currently driving an 85-year-old man to the hospital because his wife had collapsed from dehydration. Deputy Chen was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Lawson, did you threaten Mrs. Morrison in any way?" "No. I told her I wanted to talk about the water shutoff. She said she would call the police if I did not remove my hand from her door, and I said I would be happy to have law enforcement here about the situation. That was the extent of it." "Did you touch her or attempt to enter her home?" "No. I put my hand up to keep the door from closing so she would listen to me for a minute, but I never pushed it or tried to go inside." "Okay. I am going to need to follow up on the water situation. That is a separate issue from Mrs. Morrison's complaint. Can you come by the station tomorrow to give a formal statement about both matters?" "Absolutely." "But Deputy, people do not have water. It is 15 degrees outside. We have elderly residents and children. One woman is in the hospital right now because of this." "Can someone make Denise turn the water back on?" "I am not sure what authority we have in an HOA dispute, but I will look into it. In the meantime, do not have any further contact with Mrs. Morrison. If you need to communicate about HOA business, do it in writing through official channels." I agreed and hung up, frustrated but not surprised. HOA issues existed in a weird legal gray area that often left law enforcement and courts reluctant to get involved. We made it to Billings Clinic, and I helped Robert get checked in. Gloria was stable but being admitted for observation, and Roman 4 fluids. Robert looked exhausted, the worry and dehydration taking their toll. A nurse convinced him to be examined as well, and they ended up admitting him for Roman 4 fluids too. I sat in the waiting room, making calls and coordinating with neighbors. The situation had reached a critical point. We needed water, and we needed it today. Several people had already left to stay with family or friends in Billings. Others did not have that option. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Denise Morrison, sent to the entire Pine Ridge neighborhood email list. "Dear Pine Ridge residents, I understand many of you are frustrated with the current water situation. However, I want to remind everyone that this is a direct result of continued violations of our community standards. The Pine Ridge HOA has a responsibility to maintain property values and aesthetic consistency throughout the development. Over the past 6 months, the board has documented numerous violations, including but not limited to unauthorized structures, prohibited fencing, holiday decorations beyond approved timeframes, unapproved exterior paint colors, and vehicles parked in violation of street parking rules. Written warnings were mailed to all violating properties in November. Fines were assessed in December. As of January 1st, only 3 homeowners had corrected their violations and paid their fines. Therefore, the board voted to implement enforcement measures as outlined in Article 7, Section 3 of our CC and Artiques. Water service will be restored once all violations are corrected and all fines are paid in full. This is not negotiable. If you have questions about your specific violations, please email the HOA address and I will respond within 3-5 business days. I would also like to note that threatening or harassing HOA board members is unacceptable, and may result in additional fines or legal action. Let's work together to resolve this situation professionally. Sincerely, Denise Morrison, Pine Ridge HOA President. I read the email twice, my anger building. 3 to 5 business days. People could die in 3 to 5 days without water. And the bit about threatening board members was clearly directed at me. I started typing a response but deleted it. Anything I said in anger would only make things worse. Instead, I forwarded the email to Marcus Green and added a note. This is what we are dealing with. Please help. Marcus called me back within 10 minutes. Nathan, I talked to a colleague who specializes in HOA law. She said what Denise is doing is almost certainly illegal in Montana. You cannot shut off essential services to residential properties as an enforcement mechanism, even if the CC and Articus technically allow it. The law supersedes the CC and Articus. So, what do? We need to file an emergency injunction to get the water turned back on while we sort out the legal issues. But that is going to take a day or two at minimum, and it is going to cost money. We are talking filing fees, attorney fees, possibly expert witness fees if we need to demonstrate the health hazard. How much money to get through an emergency hearing? Probably $5,000 to $10,000. And that is just the beginning if this turns into a longer legal battle. I did some quick math. Divided among 47 homeowners, that was a couple $100 each, assuming everyone could pay. But many of our neighbors were on fixed incomes or living paycheck to paycheck. Start the process, I said. I will figure out the money. Nathan, people do not have water, Marcus. Start the process. I will get you a retainer by tomorrow morning. After we hung up, I created a group text with the most active neighbors: Victor Hayes, Tom Patterson, Sarah Martinez, and Jennifer Kim. I explained what the lawyer had said and what it would cost. Victor responded first. I am in for $1,000. This has to end. The others quickly agreed to contribute what they could. Within an hour, we had commitments for $7,000, enough to get started. I sent the information to Marcus and asked him to have his colleague file the emergency injunction first thing Monday morning. It was Saturday. We had to survive the weekend without water. I spent the rest of Saturday coordinating a neighborhood water distribution system. People who had gone to Billings for the day filled containers and brought them back. I drove my truck to a grocery store and bought every gallon of water I could fit in the bed. Others did the same. By evening, we had established a distribution point at Tom Patterson's house, centrally located in the development. We prioritized families with children, elderly residents, and anyone with medical needs. It was not enough for normal use, but it was enough to prevent immediate health emergencies. Sunday morning, I woke up to 17 degrees and falling. My house was cold despite the furnace running. I checked the pipes in my crawl space and found the first signs of freezing. I cranked up the heat and opened the cabinet doors under the sinks to let warm air circulate, but without water flowing through the system, it was a losing battle. By Sunday afternoon, 5 homes had reported burst pipes. The damage was starting to mount. Tom Patterson, who was a retired contractor, estimated we were looking at tens of thousands of dollars in repairs across the neighborhood, maybe more. Someone needs to be held liable for this, Tom said as we inspected frozen pipes in another home. This is not just an HOA dispute anymore. This is property damage caused by negligence, I agreed. I had been documenting everything: photos, videos, written accounts from neighbors, medical records from the Hendersons. If this went to court, we would have evidence. Sunday evening, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a professional female voice greeted me. Mr. Lawson. This is Andrea Palmer with KTVQ News in Billings. I received a tip about a situation in Pine Ridge regarding an HOA shutting off water to multiple homes. Would you be willing to talk to me about it? I did not know who had contacted the media, but I was glad someone had. Yes, absolutely. We scheduled an interview for Monday morning. Andrea said she wanted to visit Pine Ridge to see the situation firsthand and talk to multiple residents. I spread the word through the neighborhood, and several people volunteered to be interviewed. Monday morning arrived with temperatures in the single digits. I met Andrea Palmer and her cameraman at the well house. Andrea was in her early 30s, sharply dressed despite the cold, with the kind of focused intensity that made her good at her job. I showed her the notice on the well house, explained the situation, and walked her through the neighborhood. She interviewed Victor Hayes, Margaret Chen with her 3 kids, and Tom Patterson standing in front of a house with visible water damage from burst pipes. Each person told their story, and Andrea's expression grew increasingly serious. Has anyone from the HOA been willing to talk to you? She asked me, only to send threatening emails and make false police reports, I said. I showed her Denise's email and explained about the sheriff's deputy calling me. Do you think Mrs. Morrison would agree to an interview? You can try, but I doubt it. We drove to Denise's house. Andrea knocked while her cameraman filmed. Denise answered, saw the camera, and immediately tried to close the door. Mrs. Morrison, I am Andrea Palmer with KTVQ. I would like to ask you a few questions about the water shutoff in Pine Ridge. No comment. This is a private HOA matter. You are trespassing on my property. We are on your front porch conducting a news interview, which is protected by the First Amendment. Can you explain why you shut off water to 47 homes in the middle of winter? The HOA has legal authority to enforce community standards. Residents were warned. They chose not to comply. Now please leave my property before I call the police again. Are you aware that at least one elderly resident has been hospitalized due to dehydration, and that multiple homes have suffered water damage from frozen pipes? Denise's face flushed red. Those people should have corrected their violations when they were warned. This is their fault, not mine. Now get off my property, she slammed the door. Andrea turned to the camera with a slight smile. Well, there you have it. The HOA president who shut off water to an entire neighborhood and blames the residents for the consequences. This is Andrea Palmer, KTVQ News. The story aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. I watched it at Tom Patterson's house along with a dozen other neighbors. Andrea had done an excellent job, showing the human impact of the shutoff while also highlighting the legal and ethical questions. The segment ended with a shot of Denise slamming her door, and a voice-over from Andrea noting that the HOA president had declined to answer questions about the hospitalization or property damage. My phone started ringing immediately. Friends I had not heard from in months were calling to ask if I was okay. My ex-wife even called, offering to let me stay with her and her new husband until the situation was resolved, which was awkward but appreciated. More importantly, the news segment seemed to light a fire under local officials. I got a call from the Yellowstone County Health Department at 7:30 that evening. Mr. Lawson, this is James Kowalski with the County Health Department. I saw the news story about Pine Ridge. We are opening an investigation into the water shutoff. I need to inspect the well house and interview residents. Can you meet me there tomorrow morning at 9? Absolutely. And Mr. Lawson, if our investigation confirms what was reported on the news, we have authority to order the water restored immediately on public health grounds. The HOA president could also face fines or criminal charges for creating a health hazard. For the first time in 4 days, I felt a spark of hope. Tuesday morning, I met James Kowalski at the well house along with Victor Hayes and Tom Patterson. James was a serious man in his 50s, wearing county identification and carrying a clipboard with multiple forms. He inspected the locked well house, photographed the notice, and interviewed us extensively about the timeline and impact of the shutoff. "This is cut and dry," he said finally. "Shutting off water to residential properties creates an immediate public health hazard, regardless of the reason. I am issuing an emergency order requiring the water to be restored within 24 hours. If the HOA president does not comply, she will be subject to fines of up to $5,000 per day and potential criminal prosecution." "Can you make her turn it on right now?" Victor asked. "I do not have that authority, but the sheriff's office does if she refuses to comply with the emergency order. Let me make some calls." An hour later, I was standing at the well house with James Kowalski, Deputy Chen from the sheriff's office, and a locksmith that the county had hired to cut off Denise's padlock if necessary. Denise arrived in her Lexus, her face tight with anger. "This is outrageous," she said. "The HOA has legal authority, Mrs. Morrison," Deputy Chen interrupted. "You have been served with an emergency health order requiring the immediate restoration of water service to all Pine Ridge residents. You have two options. You can unlock the well house and turn the water on, or we will cut the lock and turn it on ourselves. Either way, the water is being restored today. I want to speak to my lawyer." "That is your right, but it does not change the order. Water is being restored in the next 15 minutes, with or without your cooperation." Denise pulled out her phone and made a call. I could hear her angry voice but could not make out the words. After a few minutes, she hung up and glared at us. "My lawyer says I should comply under protest and file a lawsuit against the county for interfering with private HOA business." "You do what you need to do, madam," Deputy Chen said. "Now please open the well house." Denise unlocked the padlock with shaking hands. Inside, the well pump system was more complex than I had expected, with multiple valves and control panels. Denise flipped several switches and turned a large valve wheel. We heard the pump kick on with a deep mechanical hum. "It will take about 30 minutes for water to reach all the homes," she said stiffly. "The system needs to repressurize." James Kowalski made notes on his clipboard. "Mrs. Morrison, you are going to receive a formal notice of violation from the health department. You will also be fined for creating a public health hazard. The amount will be determined after our investigation is complete." "This is ridiculous. I was enforcing the CC and Articus." "You were endangering public health," James said flatly. "There is a difference. The CC and Articus do not supersede state and county health codes." I left them arguing and drove home to check my water. Sure enough, after about 45 minutes, I heard the familiar sound of water flowing through pipes. I turned on the kitchen faucet and watched clean water pour out. It was the best thing I had seen in days. The neighborhood group chat exploded with celebration. People were crying, literally crying with relief. I sat at my kitchen table and let myself feel the exhaustion of the past 4 days. We had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Over the next few days, the full scope of the damage became clear. 17 homes had burst pipes. The total repair costs were estimated at over $100,000. The Hendersons were still in the hospital, though Gloria was improving. And multiple families had lost wages from missed work or incurred expenses from staying elsewhere. Marcus's colleague, an attorney named Rachel Torres, filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of all Pine Ridge residents against Denise Morrison and the HOA. The lawsuit sought damages for property repairs, medical expenses, lost wages, and emotional distress. It also sought to remove Denise as HOA president and implement new governance procedures to prevent future abuses. The county health department completed its investigation and fined Denise Morrison $15,000 for creating a public health hazard. She was also placed on probation, meaning any future violations would result in criminal charges. But Denise was not done fighting. She filed a countersuit against multiple residents, including me, claiming harassment, defamation, and interference with HOA business. She demanded payment of all outstanding HOA fines plus legal fees. She also tried to hold another HOA board meeting to vote on additional fines for residents who had spoken to the media. Rachel Torres shut that down immediately, getting a temporary restraining order that prevented Denise from taking any HOA enforcement actions until the lawsuit was resolved. The judge agreed that Denise had shown a pattern of retaliatory behavior and could not be trusted to act in the community's best interest. The legal battle dragged on for weeks. In the meantime, life in Pine Ridge slowly returned to normal. People fixed their burst pipes, though many had to take out loans or use savings to cover the costs. Margaret Chen started a neighborhood support fund to help families who were struggling financially. We raised over $20,000, mostly from within the community, but also from strangers who had seen the news story and wanted to help. I became the de facto spokesperson for the residents, doing several more media interviews and attending county meetings to push for stronger regulations on HOA enforcement powers. The story had struck a nerve, and I heard from people across Montana and other states who had similar horror stories about abusive HOAs. In early March, we got news that the district attorney's office was opening a criminal investigation into Denise Morrison's conduct. Specifically, they were looking at whether she had committed theft by maintaining her own water access while shutting everyone else off, and whether her actions rose to the level of criminal reckless endangerment. The investigation focused on how Denise had kept water flowing to her house. It turned out she had paid the contractor, the man I had seen at her house that first day, to install a bypass line that kept her connected to the well while everyone else was shut off. The contractor, Derek Walsh, cooperated with investigators in exchange for immunity. He provided detailed records of the installation and text messages from Denise instructing him to make sure she still had water. Those text messages were damning. In one, Denise wrote, "I do not care what you have to do. I need water for my house. Let the others deal with the consequences of their violations. Maybe this will teach them to follow the rules." In another, "Make sure no one can tell from the outside that my house is still connected. If anyone asks, tell them you are just doing routine maintenance." The texts proved that Denise had knowingly and intentionally maintained her own water access while cutting off everyone else. It also proved she knew the shutoff would cause serious hardship, but did not care. On March 22nd, Denise Morrison was arrested at her home. The charges were theft of services, criminal mischief, and reckless endangerment. She was booked into the Yellowstone County Detention Facility and released on $10,000 bail. I was not there for the arrest, but Victor Hayes was. He called me immediately. "Nathan, they just took her away in handcuffs. Her husband was yelling at the deputies, threatening lawsuits. It was quite a scene." "How do you feel?" I asked. Victor was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, relieved. What she did was not just wrong, it was criminal. People could have died. My neighbors are still paying off medical bills and repair costs. She needs to be held accountable." I agreed, but I also felt a strange sadness about the whole situation. Denise Morrison was a real person with a family, and she was about to face serious legal consequences that would likely destroy her life. Yes, she had brought it on herself through her actions. Yes, she had shown no remorse or empathy for the people she hurt. But it was still a human tragedy in its own way. The criminal case moved slowly through the system. Denise pleaded not guilty and hired an expensive defense attorney from Billings. Her strategy seemed to be arguing that she had legal authority under the CC and Articus to enforce community standards, and that any consequences were the result of residents failing to comply with the rules, not her enforcement actions. It was a terrible strategy. The text messages made it clear that she had knowingly exempted herself from the shutoff, which undermined any claim that she was just following the rules. And the county health department's findings made it impossible to argue that the shutoff had not created a serious public health hazard. The civil lawsuit was resolved first. In early May, Denise's insurance company, which provided liability coverage for the HOA, offered a settlement. They would pay $200,000 to cover property damage, medical expenses, and other costs, to be divided among affected residents based on documented damages. Denise would also resign as HOA president, agree not to serve in any HOA leadership position for 10 years, and withdraw all her counterclaims against residents. Rachel Torres advised us to take the settlement. We could probably get more if we went to trial, but it would take years and cost a fortune in legal fees. This gets you compensation now and removes Denise from power. I think it is a good result. We put it to a vote among all affected homeowners. 43 of 47 voted to accept the settlement. The 4 who voted against it wanted to push for more money and criminal charges against the HOA as an organization, not just Denise. But the majority ruled, and we accepted the settlement. The money was distributed in June. I received $18,000, which covered my share of the legal fees, repairs to my crawl space pipes, and a modest amount for the stress and inconvenience. It was not life-changing money, but it was fair. More importantly, Denise was gone from the HOA. We held an emergency election and installed new leadership. Victor Hayes as president, Sarah Martinez as vice president, and Tom Patterson as treasurer. Their first act was to amend the CC and Articus, to prohibit any enforcement action that would deny essential services to residents, no matter what violations were claimed. They also implemented a review process for all fines and enforcement actions, requiring approval from the full board and giving residents the right to appeal. The criminal case went to trial in August. I attended several days of the proceedings, watching Denise sit at the defense table in conservative business attire, her expression blank. The prosecution presented the text messages, testimony from Derek Walsh, testimony from James Kowalski about the public health hazard, and medical records from the Hendersons and others who had suffered health impacts. The defense argued that Denise had been trying to maintain community standards, and that she had reasonably believed she had authority to take enforcement action under the CC and Articus. They claimed the bypass line to her house was installed for emergency purposes, in case she needed water to deal with HOA business during the shutoff. They argued that she could not have foreseen the extent of the health and property impacts. It was not convincing. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing in September, the judge was blunt. "Mrs. Morrison, you abused a position of trust and authority to punish your neighbors for minor aesthetic violations. You knowingly created a serious public health hazard. You exempted yourself from the consequences while allowing others, including elderly and vulnerable residents, to suffer. Your actions were selfish, reckless, and showed a stunning lack of empathy. I have heard nothing from you that suggests you understand the gravity of what you did or feel any remorse for the harm you caused. Denise was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay restitution of $50,000 to be divided among victims for expenses not covered by the civil settlement. She was also permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position in Montana. I watched Denise being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her face finally showing emotion, fear, and disbelief. Her husband sat in the gallery, his face in his hands. It was a horrible end to a horrible situation that never should have happened. Life in Pine Ridge moved on. We became a tighter community because of what we had been through. Monthly neighborhood gatherings started. Not HOA meetings, but actual social events where people got to know each other as neighbors and friends. The new HOA board focused on actual community improvements rather than aesthetic nitpicking, fixing roads, maintaining common areas, organizing a neighborhood watch. The story of what happened to us spread beyond Montana. I did interviews with national news outlets and HOA reform advocates. Several states introduced legislation to limit HOA enforcement powers and prevent abuses like ours. I testified before the Montana legislature in support of a bill that would prohibit HOAs from shutting off utilities or essential services as an enforcement mechanism. The bill passed unanimously and was signed into law. I still live in Pine Ridge. My shed is still visible from the street, and no one cares. The Hendersons eventually recovered and came home from the hospital, though Gloria never quite got back to her previous level of health. They sold their house the following spring and moved to be closer to their daughter in Bozeman. I helped them pack and hugged them both goodbye, grateful they had survived the ordeal. Margaret Chen and her kids are still here, thriving. Her youngest is out of diapers now, and she has become one of the most active volunteers in the community. Victor Hayes jokes that going through the water crisis together was better relationship building than any neighborhood party could have been. Sometimes I still think about that January morning when I woke up to silence and no water flowing through my pipes. I think about how close we came to tragedy, how easily someone could have died from the dehydration or cold or stress. I think about how one person's power trip and petty obsession with rules turned into a criminal disaster that affected dozens of families. But mostly, I think about how the community came together. How neighbors who barely knew each other before the crisis became allies and friends. How people shared their limited resources and supported each other through the hardest days. How we fought back against injustice and won, not just for ourselves but potentially for other communities facing similar abuses. The well house still stands at the center of Pine Ridge, now with a simple combination lock that all residents know the code to. The old notice from Denise has been removed, replaced with a plaque that the new HOA board installed. It reads, "In memory of the January 2026 water crisis." May we never forget the importance of community, compassion, and common sense over rigid rules. We are neighbors first. Every time I drive past it, I am reminded that home is not just about property values or aesthetic standards. It is about the people you share your community with and how you treat each other when times get hard. Denise Morrison forgot that, and it cost her everything. The rest of us learned it, and we are better for it. The criminal charges, the jail time, the fines. The lawsuits, all of it happened because one person thought enforcing petty rules was more important than ensuring people had access to basic necessities like water. It was a harsh lesson in the consequences of unchecked authority and the importance of standing up against abuse, even when it comes from someone in a position of power. I am grateful it ended the way it did, with accountability and justice. I am grateful no one died, though it was close. I am grateful for the friends I made, and the strength I discovered in myself and my neighbors. And I am grateful to be living in a community that learned from its mistakes and came out stronger. The shed behind my house is still visible from the street. Sometimes I look at it and smile, remembering the absurdity of it all. A shed, Christmas lights in January, an unauthorized fence. These were the violations that Denise Morrison thought justified shutting off water to 47 homes in the middle of a Montana winter. She was wrong. The courts confirmed she was wrong. The jury confirmed she was wrong. And she paid the price for that wrongness with her freedom, her money, and her reputation. As for the rest of us in Pine Ridge, we rebuilt our community on a foundation of mutual respect and actual neighborliness, rather than rigid enforcement of arbitrary rules. The HOA still exists, but it serves the community now instead of ruling over it. Fines are rare and reasonable. Enforcement actions require genuine consensus, and no one will ever shut off our water again. On the 1-year anniversary of the water crisis, the community held a gathering at Tom Patterson's house. We shared food, stories, and laughter. Someone made a joke about being grateful for working toilets, and everyone cracked up. Victor Hayes gave a short speech about resilience and community spirit. Margaret Chen's kids ran around in the snow, happy and healthy. I stood there with a cup of coffee in my hand, surrounded by neighbors who had become genuine friends, and felt something I had not felt in years: contentment. Not because of where I lived or what my house looked like, but because of the people around me and what we had been through together. That evening, as everyone was leaving, Victor pulled me aside. "Nathan, I have been thinking. We should document what happened here, write it down, make sure the story gets told properly, so other communities can learn from our experience." "I think you are right," I said. "People need to know that this kind of abuse can happen, and they need to know they can fight back and win. Would you be willing to write it? You were at the center of most of it, and you are a good storyteller." I thought about it, about all the phone calls and meetings and court dates, about the fear and frustration and ultimate triumph, about Gloria Henderson in the hospital and Denise Morrison in handcuffs, and the community coming together in ways we never had before. "Yeah," I said, "I will write it." And so I did. This is that story. The story of how an HOA president shut off water to 47 homes in January because of petty rule violations. How people suffered and fought back. How justice was served and a community was transformed. It is a story about the dangers of unchecked authority and the importance of standing up for what is right. It is a story about neighbors taking care of each other when institutions fail them. And it is a story about how sometimes the worst experiences can bring out the best in people. If you are reading this because you are dealing with an abusive HOA or any other situation where someone in authority is abusing their power, I want you to know, you can fight back. It will not be easy. It will take time and money and energy. You will face resistance and retaliation. But it is possible to win, and it is worth it. Document everything. Build coalitions. Seek legal help. Contact the media if appropriate. Use every tool available to you. And remember that the law is on your side, even when it does not feel like it. No one has the right to endanger your health or safety, no matter what authority they claim to have. As for Denise Morrison, I do not know where she is now. She served her jail time and moved away from Montana after her release. I hope she learned something from the experience, though I honestly do not know if she did. I hope she understands now that being in charge does not mean you can ignore the welfare of the people you are supposed to serve. I hope she developed some empathy and self-awareness. But whether she did or not, the rest of us moved forward. We built something better from the ashes of her failed leadership. We created a real community, not just a deed-restricted subdivision. And we made sure that what happened to us would be less likely to happen to others through legal reforms and public awareness. The well still pumps water to all 47 homes in Pine Ridge. The pipes are all repaired. The homes are all occupied, mostly by the same families who lived through the crisis. We take care of each other now. We know how quickly things can go wrong and how important it is to have people you can count on. Every time I turn on a faucet and water flows out, I feel a little surge of gratitude. It is such a simple thing, such a basic necessity, but I will never take it for granted again. None of us will. We learned that lesson the hard way, going a week without water in the middle of winter, watching our neighbors suffer, wondering if anyone in authority would step in to help. They did, eventually. The health department, the sheriff's office, the courts, they all recognized what Denise had done was wrong and took action. The system worked, though it took longer than it should have, and people suffered in the meantime. That is the final lesson I took from all of this. The system can work, but only if people engage with it. If we had just accepted the water shutoff and paid the fines and corrected the violations, Denise would have gotten away with it. She would have continued abusing her authority, and eventually someone probably would have died from her actions. But we did not accept it. We fought back. We demanded accountability. We used every avenue available to us: legal action, media attention, government intervention. And we won. So this is my message to anyone facing a similar situation. Do not give up. Do not accept abuse from people in authority, whether it is an HOA president or anyone else. Stand up for yourself and your neighbors. Demand accountability. And know that you are not alone. There are laws and systems and people who will help you if you ask. The water crisis in Pine Ridge ended with justice served and lessons learned. Denise Morrison went to jail. The victims got compensation. The laws were changed to prevent future abuses. And a community became stronger through shared adversity. That is the story of how an HOA shut off my well in January, how 47 homes lost water, and how nobody could shower for a week. It is a story with a clear villain and clear victims, but it is also a story with heroes, ordinary neighbors who stood up against injustice and fought for what was right. I am proud to have been part of that fight. I am proud of my community and what we accomplished together. And I am grateful for the hard lessons learned, even though I wish we had not needed to learn them. The well still hums in the background, pumping clean Montana groundwater to every home in Pine Ridge. It is a sound I never get tired of hearing. It is the sound of a community that survived, fought back, and emerged stronger. It is the sound of justice served and lessons learned. It is the sound of home.